Hi, my name is Daniel Carter. I'm 34 years old and I live in a quiet town just outside of Denver, Colorado. I never imagined I'd be sitting here telling you about the night I actually died and came back. It sounds unbelievable, I know, but I promise you every word I'm about to share is as real as the air I'm breathing right now. Back then, I wasn't someone you'd expect to hear this kind of story from. I was just a regular guy, working construction during the day, lifting weights at night and trying to push my body to limits it probably wasn't meant to handle. I was young, reckless, and searching for shortcuts to strength. I remember ordering this new supplement online, thinking it would give me an edge. I had no idea that choice would set into motion the most life-changing experience of my existence. The night it happened, I was in a public restroom after finishing a late workout. My stomach was turning. Something felt terribly wrong. I got dizzy, then sick. I remember collapsing, unable to catch my breath. I choked, and then darkness. It felt like falling through the floor of reality. My last thought before it all went blank was, so this is how it ends? But then, something strange happened. Instead of nothingness, I suddenly found myself sitting in what felt like the most comfortable chair I had ever known. It was like a theater seat, soft and embracing. In front of me was a giant screen, and on that screen I saw me. Or at least, a body that looked exactly like me, lying lifeless on the bathroom floor. At first, I didn't even recognize it as mine. It was almost like watching an actor play me in some odd, surreal movie. I even remember thinking, that's not me. I'm here, sitting comfortably, watching. It didn't feel frightening at that moment, just bizarre, like I'd somehow wandered into a strange experimental art film where I was both the audience and the subject. Then it got even weirder. I could hear every thought in the room where my body lay, not just voices, but thoughts. People outside in the diner next to the restroom, the manager wondering if he should close early, the cook thinking about how tired he was, even a couple arguing at their table. It all flooded into my awareness, like hundreds of radio stations playing at once. It was overwhelming, yet strangely clear. I had studied film for a while in community college, and part of me thought, what a strange choice by the director. Why include everyone's thoughts? It's too much, it doesn't make sense. I truly believed I was just watching a movie that had some odd creative twist. It never crossed my mind that I had actually died. But as I sat there, they discovered my body. I watched paramedics rush in, watched them check for a pulse, watched them shake their heads. They zipped me into a body bag like I was nothing more than a failed rescue. I remember staring at the screen thinking, man, this movie is dark. Why would anyone film this? It was surreal. I wasn't afraid. Not yet. As the ambulance pulled away, I noticed a rookie paramedic sitting in the back. His thoughts were louder than the rest, almost painfully clear. He was berating himself over and over. Why didn't I try harder? Why didn't I speak up? Maybe there was something more I could have done. I could feel his guilt, like a storm cloud surrounding him. And then something incredible happened. From inside his chest, a glow began to appear. Not metaphorical light, real, radiant light, spilling outward like someone had placed a lantern inside him. I froze, stunned, as a voice thundered from nowhere and everywhere at once. This one is not dead. The rookie heard it too. I could tell because he suddenly paused, almost startled. But then he shook his head, muttering to himself, it's just your imagination. But the light grew brighter. His entire upper body seemed to glow like a beacon. And the voice came again, louder this time, shaking the very fabric of whatever reality I was in. This one is not dead. That was the moment he broke protocol. He unzipped the body bag. He loosened the straps. He searched desperately for signs of life. There was no pulse, but then he pressed near my inner leg and he felt the faintest spark. It was enough to make him fight for me. That was the first moment it hit me. Wait, that's me. The body wasn't just a character on the screen. It wasn't just a role being played, it was my body, my death. And as they strapped me down again, trying to resuscitate me, I felt the straps pressing into my arms, not where I sat in the chair, but on the body itself. Suddenly, I wasn't just watching anymore. I was inside it and outside it all at once. And that's when the fear came rushing in like a tidal wave. The moment I realized that the lifeless body on the gurney was actually mine, panic gripped me. It was like falling into a bottomless pit inside my own soul. Suddenly, a reel of my past began to unspool in front of me. Not the highlights I would have chosen, but the mistakes, the cruelties, the moments of selfishness I had long buried. I didn't just see them, I felt them. I felt the sting I caused in others, their anger, their sadness, their disappointment. It was unbearable. It was as if every wrong choice had left a scar in the fabric of the universe, and now I was being forced to wear them all at once. Fear poured into me like ice water, chilling every part of who I thought I was. Doubt, shame, regret. They swirled together until I wanted to scream. I remember thinking, if this is death, then I deserve the worst of it. And that thought nearly swallowed me whole. But then, something shifted. From behind me, I felt warmth. Not like physical heat, but a radiance that reached deep inside, thawing the frozen parts of me. It was subtle at first, like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. And then it grew. Stronger, deeper, until I felt like every fiber of my being was being touched by love. Real, unconditional love, unlike anything I'd ever felt on earth. This love didn't demand that I be better. It didn't criticize. It simply told me in its own silent language, you matter. You always have. You are loved beyond measure. Tears, though I didn't even have a body to cry with, seemed to pour from me. I saw suddenly the good moments too. Times I'd forgotten. Little acts of kindness I never gave myself credit for. Smiles I had caused, encouragement I had offered, even small sacrifices I made that no one noticed. The balance was clear. There was more light in me than I had ever believed, and for the first time in that strange afterlife I felt maybe I was worth saving. That's when I turned toward the warmth, desperate to see its source. Standing there was a figure, tall, clothed in white, radiating a presence that was both powerful and gentle. At first sight I thought, this is God. My entire being wanted to fall to its knees. But then he laughed softly, a sound that carried infinite kindness, and said, no, I'm not God. I'm your guide. I'm here to walk with you wherever you choose to go. I'll never forget the way he looked at me, like he knew everything about me, and yet there was no judgment in his gaze. Just compassion, just love. He told me his name was Elias. He didn't force me to go anywhere. Instead, he placed the choice in my hands. Return to the broken body in the ambulance, or continue forward, out into the endless universe, toward what he called home. When he said that word, home, my soul shook. Because that was exactly how it felt. Like I had been gone a very long time, wandering through pain and chaos, and now someone was finally offering me the door back. I told him without hesitation, I want that. I want to go home. Elias smiled, but he didn't rush me. Instead, he said, before you choose, you need to understand what this life was about. You came to Earth for a reason, and before you leave it, you must know what you've learned. He explained that Earth wasn't a courtroom as so many religions painted it. It wasn't about judgment or punishment. It was a school. One of the hardest schools in the universe, but also one of the most rewarding. In Earth School, he said, every struggle was a lesson. Every heartbreak, every failure, every challenge, it was all part of a curriculum designed to help the soul grow. You didn't come here to be perfect, Elias told me. You came here to become authentic. That word struck me like lightning. Authentic. He explained that authenticity was the first and most important lesson for every soul. I had lived so many versions of myself. Daniel the construction worker, Daniel the tough guy at the gym, Daniel the obedient son, Daniel the party friend. But none of those masks were really me. They were costumes I wore to survive, to belong, to hide. The real Daniel, the authentic core of my being, was buried underneath all of it. And that was the part of me that could grow beyond Earth, the part worth carrying into eternity. Elias stood beside me, his presence steady and calming, like a lighthouse guiding me through the storm of my thoughts. He told me the first lesson I needed to grasp was authenticity. "Daniel," he said, "you've worn masks your whole life. Masks to please others, to protect yourself, to fit in. But none of those are truly you. Your authentic self is the thread running through every version you've played. That's who you must discover, because only the authentic can grow." His words struck me so deeply that I felt pieces of those masks starting to crack. He showed me glimpses of my life, how I behaved differently with my parents, my friends, at work, even alone. Each version seemed disconnected, like I was splitting myself into fragments. But then Elias gently pulled those fragments together, weaving them into a single thread of light. "This," he said, "is you. This is your essence. This is the version of yourself you must nurture if you want to progress beyond this world." I had never felt so seen before. The second lesson, he explained, was about love. Not the romantic kind we write songs about, but the raw, unfiltered love that exists without condition. Most people, Elias said, try to love before they even know who they are. But until you find authenticity, love will be fragile, more need than truth. Once you understand who you really are, then you can love yourself, and only then can you truly love others. It made me realize how often I had mistaken attachment, fear, or even control for love. Elias told me that love was the energy of the universe itself. Every cell, every star, every breath was carried by it. When you refuse to love, he said, you step out of alignment with reality itself. To love is to exist in harmony with creation. Hearing that, I felt as though the very fabric of the universe pulsed with warmth, like a great heart beating, and somehow, I was part of that heartbeat. The third lesson was about intuition, what he called the inner voice. He explained that our Creator left us a guiding spark within, the spirit, the gut instinct, the quiet whisper we all feel but often ignore. It's always there, he told me, but it can be strengthened or silenced. The choice is yours. Feed it, and it will guide you through storms. Ignore it, and you'll drift into darkness. I thought about all the times I had ignored that quiet tug in my chest only to regret it later. It wasn't just coincidence, it had been my spirit speaking. And then Elias surprised me. He began to talk about technology. Technology, he said, is neither good nor evil. It is energy. And energy will always mirror the intention of the one who wields it. He showed me how phones, screens, and constant distractions often drain the soul instead of feeding it. If you don't know what your technology is doing to you, he warned, then it is tearing you down. But if you use it with intention, it can lift you higher. I thought about how many nights I had numbed myself scrolling endlessly, and I realized how much time I had given away to emptiness. He then introduced what he called the hour of power. He said that what we consume in the first 30 minutes after waking and the last 30 minutes before sleeping shapes who we become spiritually. That sacred hour frames your entire being, Elias said. Guard it well. Fill it with light, gratitude, and intention. Because what you worship in that time, you become. The idea echoed inside me like a bell, clear and undeniable. The fourth lesson was prejudice, Elias said. You cannot enter higher realms carrying prejudice. To despise another being is to despise creation itself. I felt confident, even proud, telling him, I don't carry prejudice. I've always been open-minded. But Elias looked at me with kindness and asked, and what about prejudiced people? How do you feel about them? I laughed bitterly. I hate them. They're ignorant. They're destructive. They're disgusting. Elias placed a hand on my shoulder, and his eyes softened with compassion. Daniel, he said, hatred is still prejudice. Even if you think it's justified, it chains you to the same prison. To hate those who hate is still to hate. His words hit me like a hammer. I had never considered that my disdain for prejudice was its own form of division. It was like realizing I had been carrying a hidden weight all along. To drive the point home, Elias gave me a vision of one of the most prejudiced people I had known. I walked a mile in his shoes, felt his upbringing, his fears, his brokenness. I didn't agree with him, far from it. But I understood him. And in that understanding, I saw the key. Only love could break the cycle. Only someone who didn't fit his narrow view could love him enough to open his heart. That realization humbled me deeply. By the time Elias finished showing me these lessons, authenticity, love, intuition, technology, and prejudice, I felt like I had lived an entire lifetime in the span of moments. Each truth stripped away another illusion, another lie I had clung to. I was being rebuilt piece by piece into someone more whole than I had ever been in life. And yet I knew my journey was only beginning. Elias smiled as if he could see my thoughts and said, "Daniel, are you ready for the next step?" Elias looked at me with a gaze that seemed to pierce through every layer of my soul. "Daniel," he said, "there is more you must see before you decide." He lifted his hand, and in an instant my surroundings dissolved into light. The weight of every lesson seemed to fall away, and I was carried into a place so beautiful, so alive, that even now words barely scratch the surface of what I experienced. The first thing I felt was connection, not just to the place itself, but to everything. Every blade of grass, every tree, every ripple of water carried its own consciousness, its own gentle awareness. The grass beneath my feet loved me. I could feel it, not metaphorically, but tangibly, like its essence was speaking to every cell in my being, whispering, "You belong here." Hills rose in the distance, rolling and green, glowing with a vibrancy that no earthly color could compare to. The sky itself pulsed with a living light, golden and soft, like an eternal sunrise. It wasn't just scenery. It was love, poured into form. Breathing there felt like plugging a dying battery into the source of its power. I realized then, this was home. This was what my soul had been longing for all along. I walked toward a stream, its water clearer than crystal yet glowing as though lit from within. As I approached, the water spoke, not with words, but with presence. It asked me, "Do you wish me to cover you?" With all the eagerness of a starving man offered bread, I said yes. The water flowed over me, starting at my toes, rising across my body. But it didn't feel wet. Instead, it felt like warmth and coolness at the same time, an impossible harmony that filled me with peace. Everywhere the water touched, I was made whole. Old wounds I had carried for years, the shame, the scars, the brokenness from childhood abuse, were washed away. It was as if each crack in my being was being filled with light, sealing me into a new, perfect form. I had never known such healing, such completeness. I realized I wasn't just being restored, I was being reborn. Elias stood beside me as I emerged from the stream, radiant and whole. He placed an arm around me, pulling me into a hug. And that hug, it was unlike anything possible on earth. Communion, intimacy, love, healing. Every sacred connection I had ever known on earth was just a faint shadow of that embrace. In that hug, I felt myself melt into the very heart of creation, as if God himself were holding me. Then Elias leaned close, looking me in the eyes, and said words that would never leave me. "Daniel, this is going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it." The weight of those words sank deep into me. He wasn't just speaking about my choice. He was speaking about life itself, about the return to earth I hadn't even considered yet. In that moment, I began to understand. Heaven wasn't only a destination. It was a reminder of what we were meant to carry back into the world. Even as I bathed in that love, I could feel something pulling at me. A tether, weak but insistent, pulling me back toward the body I had left. Elias didn't resist it. He simply watched with compassion. And then I heard a voice, not from heaven, but from earth. It was my brother standing by my hospital bed, praying over my unconscious body. His prayer echoed across dimensions, reaching me where I stood in the light. The love in his words struck me like a bolt of lightning. We hadn't always gotten along. In fact, many times we had been distant, cold. But in that moment, his love for me was undeniable, powerful, pure. I could feel it, and it anchored me. With every syllable of his prayer, I felt the tether grow stronger, dragging me away from the radiant fields, the living water, the perfect embrace of heaven. I wanted to fight it, to scream, "No, let me stay." But I couldn't resist. With a force beyond my control, I was pulled from the light, ripped from the beauty of home, and slammed back into the broken body that lay on a hospital bed. The transition was violent. My eyes flew open at 1:11 a.m. I tore at the tubes and wires, gasping for breath, overwhelmed by the weight of flesh and gravity. Claustrophobia crashed down on me like a prison door slamming shut. I was alive again, but part of me wished I wasn't. When I woke up in that hospital bed, panic consumed me. I ripped away the straps and wires as if they were chains, desperate to escape the weight of my own body. After floating in light and love, the density of flesh felt unbearable, like being forced into a coffin while still alive. For hours I sat there trembling, trying to convince myself that what I had seen wasn't a dream. But deep inside, I knew. It was real. The days that followed were darker than I ever imagined. Depression wrapped itself around me like a shadow. I didn't want to be alive. I didn't want to eat or speak or even breathe. I kept whispering in my mind, "Send me back, let me go home." Every night I prayed that I wouldn't wake up, and yet every morning I did. The memory of heaven burned inside me, and earth felt like a prison I couldn't escape. But in those silent moments of despair, Elias's words echoed in me. "This is going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it." They were the only reason I kept holding on. Even when everything in me screamed to give up, I clung to that promise. I didn't understand how life could be worth it again, but some part of me trusted that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Years later, I met her, Anna. From the moment I looked into her eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt since heaven. There was light in her gaze, a reflection of that same love I thought I had lost forever. She didn't just rescue me from loneliness. She reminded me that heaven could exist here too, in small glimpses, in the love we give and the love we receive. For the first time since my death, I felt grateful to be alive. But the story didn't end there. One afternoon in a small-town museum in Wyoming, I saw an old black and white photo projected on a screen. My heart nearly stopped. It was Elias. The same face, the same eyes, though the name beneath the photo was different. Charles Carter, my great-grandfather. I rushed to my grandmother and asked her about it. She smiled softly and said, "Oh, you mean Grandpa Charles. We called him Drake. He's part of our family history." I stood frozen, tears welling in my eyes. It wasn't a dream. Elias, Drake, Charles, whatever name he bore, he was real. He was my blood. My guide hadn't been some random stranger. He had been family all along. That revelation sealed everything I had experienced. It was no hallucination. It was a journey, planned and woven into the fabric of who I am. Even now, years later, there are things about that experience I rarely talk about. Because part of what I was shown wasn't just personal, it was collective. Elias let me glimpse the future of humanity. What I saw was both terrifying and beautiful. Our world was shifting, dividing between fear and love. Most people driven by fear would choose safety over truth, building cages around themselves, but others would awaken. I saw communities of light rising across the earth, places where people lived not for greed or power, but for connection, for love, for authenticity. They were like beacons across the darkness, cities of light, growing stronger together. And I knew then, this was our destiny. Humanity's story doesn't end in destruction. It ends in awakening for those willing to choose love. So when people ask me now, "Daniel, what was the point of your near-death experience? What can I learn from it?" I tell them this: Earth is not a courtroom, it's a classroom. We're not here to be condemned, we're here to grow, to strip away our masks, to learn love in its truest form, to strengthen the inner voice that calls us toward light, and to remember that even in the darkest times we are never truly alone. I still long for heaven, I still miss it every single day, but I no longer see earth as a punishment. I see it as preparation. Elias was right. It's hard, some days unbearably hard, but it is worth it, because heaven isn't just waiting at the end. Pieces of it are scattered here, hidden in the love of a brother's prayer, in the eyes of a wife, in the smile of a stranger. And when my time truly comes, I know exactly where I'm going. Home.